Okay. Okay, title, I'm going to talk about 1920s, and it's the year I modeled is 23, so it's 100 years ago. Next slide. Okay, 1920s. Something I want you to understand the scale of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus and when they did it. You look back, no TV, computers, roads were dirt or gravel, transportation, bicycles, open door trucks at that time. Telegraph existed, no cell phones, internet. Electricity was scarce. Street lighting was poor, if at all. Sunday was for resting and going to church. And the circus arrival in all across America was the highlight of the year. It was big, big time for people, and businesses often closed. So everything I'm going to talk about happened with this. And as I've gone into the research, it just boggles my mind, the massive scale of the combined Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. So as I go through the slides, remember that. Next slide. Why I do this, I've loved trains since I was six o'clock.
Hello, everyone. Children ages grades K through 3rd can join us in the School Health Center for Reading Buddies. If you would like to come join us and read for 15 minutes, just bring your library card.
I've been a train modeler since I was 6. I grew up near Baraboo, Wisconsin. So that's part of my love for circus. And I wish I knew I had loved it as much when I was close as I do now, because a lot of stuff has been lost. I'm a chemical engineer, so that's one of the problems I have in life. I'm a process person. I love processes. So how things move, I just get enamored with, and I get goosebumps on the goosebumps. 1923, why I modeled that era. It's many people model 1950s, which I find is a great transition era. Late steam, early diesel. I love that. The same type of thing with 23. Open door trucks. 24, trucks started having closed doors across the country. It was a time of horses. And the other reason that 23, my stepdad flew B-29, and I do that in honor of him and all the people. Next slide. Okay, now I'm showing you something, and this is a test. There'll be several tests as we go. There's a big reward at the end. There isn't online. This is an aerial slide of the time. It could be somewhere 20s to 30s. I wasn't sure when I first saw it. And you'll see the scale. I don't know how they did that. This is the scale of the show. This is the combined show back then. There's the sideshow over there, the midway, the menagerie, the 6-pole big top, dressing wardrobe, ring stock, dining, cookhouse, baggage stock. What is missing? No, the train tracks aren't shown, but what other circus structures missing? Yeah. No, the animal one is over in the menagerie. Yep. There's a second baggage stock, because one baggage stock tent only holds 200 draft horses. And I want to give you the idea of the scale of this thing. It's monstrous. Go to the next slide. This is a slide I'm trying to buy from Circus World Museum. They can't find it right now, but I have offered them decent money. I won't tell you how much, but this is one of my favorite. This is 2 shots. This is showing the cars. These are elephant cars. I'll explain that as I go through the talk. The massive crowd going through the sideshow and the menagerie on this side. Next slide. And this is showing the cookhouse, the 3 tents, 2 for draft stock, 1 for ring stock. Ring stock means those are the horses that go into the big top on the rings. Draft is what does all the pulling. And I love that combination of the two, showing the size of the number of people. You can see that they put cars everywhere. They had the number of trains that came into a town, the number of cars. I don't know how they handled it, and I'm going to talk about that as we go through it, give you an idea of how many railroads were handled, how many people had to be involved to make that happen. Typical day, 2 shows a day, not on Sunday. Typical crowd, 10 to 12,000 people. Okay, next slide. So massive. I mean, this was big time when it came in. What they moved in the 20s, to give you an idea, over 1,000 people were part of the Ringling Brothers show. Massive number of people. 130 cage and backlock wagons. All of the wagons that it took to move the tents, the poles, the stakes, everything. 150 ring stock horses, 350 draft horses, and I say plus because it varied from year. 30 plus elephants. You know, why only 10 elephants when you can carry 30? Circuses did things over the top back then because, again, go back in 1920s, there was no TV. When this came to town, this was the most exciting thing you've ever seen for that whole year. It was absolutely huge and immense. So it drew from all of those areas. They had elephant cars, they had 20 camels typically, same thing, zebras. 10 doesn't cut it. 30 and 20 looks much better, so they did that. What wagons weren't needed back in the 20s? If you think about it now, no parade wagons. Ringling, when they combined with Barnum and Bailey, dropped the parade wagons. All circuses carry parade wagons. I put down there 130 cage and backlog wagons. I didn't list any parade wagons. There were many circuses traveling in the early 1900s. All of them carried parade wagons because they had a big parade before they had the 2 o'clock show. So you had to carry those on the train. Ringling did not have that and dropped that. They were the only circus that had done that. Next slide.
When did they bring them back?
Pardon me? They never brought them back. They dropped them. They didn't. They couldn't carry them.
They always make a big deal in Cleveland when they were bringing them in. They had a parade from the tracks
to the show lot. Yeah, to the show lot. Yeah, but they always had a parade downtown where the parade wagons were. They carried a few wagons for the big top shows, some floats, but all circuses had a big street parade that went downtown, and people lined up to see that as an attraction at about 11 o'clock during the day to draw people in. And so they had to have horses and wagons to do that. Ringling did not have enough railroad cars to handle that in the 1920s. Everybody else did. And I'll go through and explain how big Ringling was from a number of trains. And most people have the number of trains that Ringling ran wrong. Ringling actually needed a lot more trains than people, and I'll talk about that. Next slide. That's what they didn't have. This is Ringling Brothers Hapu wagon. Now, a lot of these pictures are my own or I've gotten from museums, and this is a typical parade wagon. It might have a band on the top of it. A lot of the parade wagons had bands. The typical parade would have 4, 5, 6, 8 bands. They'd have the elephants, they'd have the camels, they'd have the zebras, all walking. Parades took a long time to execute and get to. Next, but none of that existed. I've got a lot of models, and a lot of them are parade wagons that I can't use on my Ringling Brothers Circus. Okay, now how did the service move to the next town? What type of cars are needed? How long the train cars were in the 1920s? How many animals go into a car? Why were so many horses needed? I mean, my God, we're talking 400, almost 400 draft horses. How many cars could a locomotive pull? I know you guys know all this stuff, right? What did each car need to arrive? When did each car need? Now, if you know that, my talk is done. Any questions? Yeah, you don't probably. Some of you don't. Now, railroaders, I won't lie about the railroad stuff. I might lie about the circus stuff, But when I get to do this, this is aimed for the National Circus Historical Society Convention in August. I don't know if they'll be accepted or not. They're highly interested in this because they've never seen it from the railroad perspective before. So I'm hoping it gets accepted. If it doesn't hurt my ego. I'll just try the next year. But okay, next slide. So I want to give you an idea. When was the first circus train? 1856, the very first one. When was the real first train that really ran a decent length? 1871, P.T. Barnum. This is the Circus Historical Society publication. I've got extra copies if you want it. You don't hurt my feelings if you don't take it. There's memberships there if you want it. But this is a special one they did on P.T. Barnum. If you want it just to have, to see how it all started, you're welcome. And if I don't have enough copies, I could get more. But they're very interested in hoping circus modelers like this stuff and will be interested. They want to keep the interest in circus going. Circus Historical Society people, for the most part, are real circus people. And I had a chance to meet some of them in Peru, and the stories that they could tell.
May I have your attention, please? Reading Buddies is happening now in our school help center. Reading Buddies is for kids in kindergarten through third grade. You read for 15 minutes and you get to earn a prize. If you want to come join us, bring your library card and we'll sign you up.
Yeah, and you get a prize from me too, I got. Now, the important thing of trains, of circus, before the trains, they had to go from town to town. Remember, dirt roads for the most part, probably no gravel roads. You can know how many miles per hour they could make to one day. So they did small towns back then. When Barnum stuck them on the train, now he could do 250 to 200 miles a day. Now he could look at big cities. Why did he need big cities? You had to pay for those train cars that you bought. So that was a big change of how they really started. Next slide. This is one of the early shots they've got. That's actually a circus flat car. Now, the bad part of it is all modern cars have a side to it. It's called a gunnel, that it's held in by some posts. But that's how the very first circus train from P.T. Barnum, all those flat cars, nothing on there. Go to the next slide. Okay, now I'm going to tell the circus people I paid a couple circus guys $20 or railroad guys to turn over a boxcar for me. And they'll believe that, of course, you won't. But truss rods, my layout. We are truss rod people. So we have, that is not a circus car truss rod. Circus cars have 8. Circus cars are massive. The load they carry are massive. You can't do that with 8 truss rods, but I want to show them, you know, you got to adjust that thing. And when you've got 8 and you're underneath there, way underneath there, and you'd like to have this lever like this, but the lever can't go because you got the ground there and the stupid car there. Real problem that circus people did not like. Okay, next slide. And that's part of the evolution of why circus people did things with circus cars. Next slide. Now, this is Denver off of my layout. Just to give you an idea, 30-foot rail cars, very common in the 1870s, 1880s, and most of mine are in that frame. Two wagons. Well, they eventually went to 72 foot was the normal, and you can see now you can get 4. And that's a very important change because the way railroad people charged. I can't believe railroad people were that dumb. But I'm going to show you how the circus people handled their thinking. Go next slide. This is all wood. Yeah, the long one. They went to. We're getting ahead, but that's great. Went to steel underframes in 1911. Bill's Wild West was the first one that did, and I'll talk about that even more. Go ahead. But they were all wood. Okay, here's what the railroads did back then. 5-car increments is how they charged. 10-car increments for 40 to 10 car lengths. Fees not based on weight or length of car. Oh, really? So what do circuses do? 5, 10, 15, 20. I mean, okay, it might be once in a while, 4, it might be 19. They never did 6, 11, 16, 21. You are not going to pay for that extra car 5 times if you're going to keep your job on the circus. And I can show you loading list for the trains after loading list, where it was 24 cars for the section, maybe 23 once in a while, but typically 24, 25, or 19 and 20. Who in the heck would do that? Did they not understand that on my layout, a C28 has 28,000 traction effort, C48 has 4. I don't get it. Next slide. Okay, so the circuses, they're not dumb. They moved to 50 and 60 foot truss rod cars to save a lot of money. And carrying capacity obviously increased when you do that. 1911, the Wild West Show bought the first steel underframe cars. 1911 was the largest year of circuses by rail. There were 30 to 40 big circuses out there traveling. One was Ringling Brothers and one was Barnum and Bailey. Both of those shows were about 80 cars each. The other many circuses were like 40, 50 cars. And car length increased when they sent steel to 72 feet. So then what did Ringling do in 1911? Of course, they did nothing. They stayed with their 60-foot cars. Ugh. Don't make sense to me. Go ahead. I think I know why. Ringling Brothers bought Barnum and Bailey in 1908. So the Barnum and Bailey circus name still ran as Barnum and Bailey, but it was really owned by Ringling. Ringling also kept Ringling as their separate. They kept them as separate entities and managed them that way. Ringling Brothers had both 50 and 60-foot flat cars. And both circuses operated independently till 1918, when in both shows they merged. So I think the war effort of World War I took a hard hit, because circuses all then, again, remember, they were cash. They were cash. If you missed a show because of bad weather, you better have some cash reserves in the safe, because you got to pay everybody as you go. There's no credit cards back then. Okay, moved both rail fleets to Trumbull, Connecticut. Next slide. This is one of the slides I love. That is a picture of the combined, every car they had. They obviously had to use other sidings, because Barnum and Bailey sidings could not handle another 80 to 90 car fleet that came into Trumbull, Connecticut. The bar was over here, pardon me? This is headquarters for Barnum and Bailey. Bridgeport, Connecticut, Trumbull, Connecticut was headquarters for Barnum and Bailey. P.T. Barnum grew up in Bridgeport, and they've got statues of him there. And that was an easy place to put it rather than Baraboo, Wisconsin. Baraboo cold, didn't have near the room. Bridgeport was closer to New York. New York was the first stop of the season, and New York gave you a chance to raise a lot of cash without traveling on the rails for a while, because you left Bridgeport, hit New York, 5 days of raising money for the season. So, and you can't do that in Baraboo, Wisconsin. I wish they would have stayed there, selfishly. I hit this last year in my visit there in the National Convention. Bar over here is still there. They had a separate entrance for Barnum and Bailey people. They had another entrance for Ringling Brothers people. They did not like each other, even though they were owned by the same company. Still the same show. Fire department was over here. Fire station is still there. P.T. Barnum had so many fires that they finally decided to build a fire department here, the city of Bridgeport, still there. Okay, I mean, it's now a ballpark. It's sad to see. Oh my God, I look at all those cars that were assembled. Go ahead, next. So 1919, they moved them. The best cars from both fleets were taken. You wouldn't take a bad car. So they handpicked the cars that they wanted to form the new combined Barnum and Bailey shows. The parade was eliminated. They didn't have room on the cars for that. Rail car length still at 60 feet with truss rods. And by the early 20s, most circuses were at 72 feet with steel, no truss rods to maintain. Finally, in 1929, Ringling went to 72-foot cars with steel underframes. It took them a long time to get that, and I think the combining of the shows probably prevented the costs from them doing that, but they ran truss rods. So for me modeling, I have to look at 50 and 60-foot flat cars, 60-foot other cars, and I'll tell you some of the cars. Next slide. Because I haven't told you that. Okay, what types of cars are on a circus train? Obviously coaches, flat cars. Did you know that there are end and non-end flat cars? Probably didn't. I don't know. But that's on the test. I'll tell you the answer so you score good. Elephant cars. Stock cars. Remember, ring and stock cars, ring and draft. Stock cars for animals. Stock car for zebras, storage cars. What type of cars are missing on here? Pardon me? No, that would be, they carried all that, all the animals like that, lions and tigers were carried in their cages. So cage wagons. In the cut called the cage cut. All the cage wagons were hooked together in one cut with three wagons on a flat car. The private car, the boss man's got to have a private car. And there's another car that's often on the trains called a pie car. It was kind of a dining car, but there's also an advertising car that's not on this list. Next slide, advertising. I'll show you a picture of one in a minute. Okay, what's the very first train to arrive in the city? And I'm going to love the circus people when I ask that. Some of them will know it. This is the very first train to arrive in the city. Doesn't look like a circus train to me. What is it? No, it's a normal train, and it's got the advanced man on it. I don't think they had women back then doing it. The advanced person has to hit town about 3 weeks. I'm telling you how this circus, this big show moved, and that's what I want to give you a sense of. So you got to get somebody out there first, because you got what? You got to get grain, oats. You got to get food for, you got 1,000 people coming. What do? Go to Walmart and get a couple dozen eggs or something? No, you've got a ton of work. You've got to probably lease some land. What else do you have to know if you're going to unload all these wagons? You have to know, what are the grade crossings like? Are you ready for these monster trains that come in and start unloading wagons? If you're not ready, then somebody's got to get some dirt moved, and you got to get ready for this. This is big. And if you've never been to this town before, the grade crossings might suck. They might be good for cars going across, and might not be good for a circus train coming in. Next slide. So, typically only 1 to 2. We'll probably work this rear end off. Okay, next. Okay, advanced man duties. I've seen. Now, I think I covered, you got to order animal stuff, people stuff. You got to confirm water resources. You got a lot of things that want water. The unloading site, you got to look at the grade to the big lot show. Big lots or shows were not next to the train tracks often, sometimes a few miles away. And that's a challenge. Now, the one I like is, next question, poles to the engine or poles to the caboose? Are you with me? What's on a wagon? What's the front of a wagon that horses are hooked to? The pole. So why do you worry about whether the poles are facing the engine or the caboose that isn't on the train? The other way. It's how you unload the train. So when the advanced man is out there, he's got to know that, because if you load the wagons the wrong way, when you get to that town, you are in deep trouble, deep trouble. So they, right. Yep. The previous people would know that when they load the wagons, the poles go towards the engine if that's the way you're going to unload. And that changes every town. Now, again, 1920, there's no computers, there's a telegraph. Okay, go. Next one. Okay, advertising. The second train coming out, counting trains with me, and that's on the test. Second train has got the first advertising car. I'm showing you number advertising car, an older one. They actually ran 3 advertising cars on 3 different trains. So we're now up to 4 trains that it takes to move the big show. Advanced man on train 1, advertising car on 2, advertising car number, second one on 3, the last advertising car on train number 4. And typically, ton of people, yes.
These cars travel in normally scheduled trains?
Yes, yeah, yep. They had to work with all the different railroads, stick them on the end of the train and drop the car. And then these people do their thing and then they're picked up by another train. So there's actually more trains if I count them, this thing being picked up. But look at the body count on one car. They sleep in the car and they work in the car. All the bunks were over all the big paste tables. Okay, next. I mean, I'm just floored when I got into the research. Now, if you're putting posters up, why only put one poster on a building when you can smother the thing? Now, if you try that today, this is not unusual back in the 20s, because they wanted to draw in 10 to 20,000 people a day. So they plastered everything and nobody minded, because this was a big event of the year. It's like the World Series. Next. I love that shot. Okay, now, train number 5. The circus train hasn't even arrived yet. Why this one? Now, what's on this train? A guy gets off at the end. This is called the 24-hour man. He's there 24 hours before the real train comes that's loaded. What's his job? His job is to make sure nobody ahead of him screwed up. He's checking on everybody else. And he makes sure that when that train arrives, he meets the train coming in. So this guy is bopping all around, but he meets the train, and whoever he has to tell everything is okay. That means water's coming, feed's coming for the animals, feed's coming for the people. It goes just down the list. So I mean, wow, just blew me away. Okay, next slide. Now the train's coming. First one, you got to be excited, right? You can feel the train, you can smell the animals. Where's the elephant? Where's the locomotive on this train? That's on the test. I'm giving you the answer, so I know you're going to score high. Which way? Is it over there or here? Why is it on the right? Oh, you must be a circus buff. That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Now remember, Ringling didn't own the train crew. Ringling, none of these people own the locomotives. You got to tell somebody all of this stuff. And you've got tons of critters in there that are highly expensive. They know their jobs, and you don't put them, well, you're railroad people. I don't even have to tell you that. I mean, you got couples and you got bing, 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 all the way down. Yeah, you put them up here, so you hurt them the least or jostle them around the least. Okay, next. Yeah, a lot of circus people wouldn't know that. Okay, next slide. Good, you're going to score high. I'm going to give you a higher grade. Okay, I'm one of the very few in the country have this loading list. I got this because I went to Peru, Indiana. They put out a call help for the Circus Hall of Fame. They reopened after the pandemic, and Oh, I volunteered and they did not know how old I was. So I thought, oh, Jerry, he looks like he's 40. We're going to have him rebuild the 1908 office building. Oh. And of course, I didn't bring tools. I asked, can I bring tools? No, we got them all. They had no tools. I mean, just unreal. But Bob Klein, I met some of the most wonderful circus people in my life. Bob Klein had his own circus and tiger act. He can tell stories, the likes of which he would get up in the morning and there's a dead deer on the driveway. You got to feed those animals, lions and tigers, and unreal. He has got more stuff buried in his house, maybe 2 trucks full. I told him I was up to, he dug through his files. This is the only loading list that's never been published. He just published, he sent me 27 and 28. He published the 28 finally, just recently, but this is 28. You'll see 3 typical wagons per car, because the typical circus wagon was often around 20 feet, 19, 18 feet. And so there's, I mean, and this is for section 1, 17 flat cars, 3 stock cars, 1 store car, 4 coaches on the first train coming into town. The interesting thing about this is when you add up all of the lengths of the circus wagons and you add up all the lengths of the railroad cars carrying them, there was a 2% difference. They are that precise. 2% difference in the length. And you don't have the choice of which wagon you want to bring in which section on a Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey train. Certain wagons have to arrive at the right time on the right section or you screw yourself. So they were that sophisticated, only 2% unused space unloading all those things. And go ahead, and I'll hit that again, but you'll see a theme, and it's throughout this. There is no variation in how this is done. And most circuses did that. People who vary things screw it up big time. You can't unload and load differently. It's got to be done exactly the same way every single time because of the number of cities you are hitting every year and the cost of screwing up what Doug does when he joined my show. He loaded something different. You can't do that. The horse of choice. Now we're talking how it moved. 350 some horses to 400. I've seen numbers of 500. The draft horse of the choice, the Percheron. There's 5 major draft horse sizes. Most people know the Clydesdale. Circuses did use Belgium at one point. They did not use Suffolk and there's one more. Shire is the 5th. These horses were good looking. They could work their rear ends off during the day and still looked in good shape. Another thing, what ruled them out over the Clydesdale, what would it be in the 1920s? And what are the roads like? What are the lots like? What are they? Dirt. And what's it do once in a while in the summer, except if you're in the West nowadays? It rains. What do you need to be able to pull a wagon and move? You need something that's sure-footed. The Percheron horse was the most sure-footed of the draft horses. A Clydesdale is not a sure-footed horse at all. You also need horses that you can foot in the cars. So Percheron, and there was enough of them that Ringling Brothers actually could get the color they wanted, because you got to look the same. I mean, this is big time advertising show, and you got to get the right size, because you can't put 15 jumbos in a car next to and get 5 skinnier ones. So they actually ordered horses on a certain size, and they could get it for a long time until as circuses moved to trucks and breeding of Percherons decreased, then they had to go to Belgians for a while, and that happened with some circuit. This is transition time, remember. The 20s, trucks are just starting to come, but A lot of people still driving around with horse and buggy. Next slide. Good, we're moving now. Here's just showing, this is the ring stock or the draft stock or ring stock. See the two different box cars, stock cars? The board at the top and the board lower. That's Barnum and Bailey. That's Ringling Brothers. So if I'm modeling this, that's what I have to do, right? If I'm trying to be accurate. I mean, that is just massive. Okay, next slide. And that's what I'm looking for. Now, this is the inside of a stock car. What do you see is wrong? Look, huh? Well, okay, you're right. That's good. Yeah, but I mean, door. What's in here? Door. Why aren't they opposite? I mean, don't these people know how to build a car? Do you see that difference? This door is here. This door is further here. Why is that? That's exactly right. You're going to fill this whole car up with horses completely. So you're going to face this bunch this way, and then this bunch goes this way. And you want a trough there. That trough has got oats in it, run by a chain at night. And in the morning, before they're ready to go, the chain is pulled up and the horses get their feeding of oats and they're ready to go. 60-foot cars, 23 horses. So 12 that way, 12 that, and the horse in the middle is what? Well, that's a wedge horse. That's what they call the wedge horse. The other interesting thing about this is, again, I'm trying to give you an idea of the efficiency of moving this monster show, and I keep using that term. This is not small time. Did you remove the harness from the horse? Why would you do that? Takes time. The harnesses were left on the horses, but that's heavy, and you don't want to cause an uncomfort for the horse. So what they do? The horses were lifted a little bit off of the horses with S-chain hooks that would collapse if the horse went down for some reason. You certainly don't want the horse to go down, but once in a while that would happen. You don't want the horse to choke. So that S-shaped hook had to become straight and let the horse go down. The other thing that I was fascinated as I got into the research and have talked to people on this is that Tom went to next Sally, next to Doug, next to Carl. Every single time. No deviation allowed, Doug. You get it? And why did they do that? Why did they do that?
So the horses knew the one next to them.
That's exactly right. That's right. Yes, you want the same smell. You want, this is stress enough for these animals. They're going to work their butt off. And I mean, it tells me as I read and done the research, these circus people were not dumb. They probably made a lot of mistakes in 1871 when they started, but they realized that Tom likes Sally. Now, if they didn't, they handled that, but they tried to create comfort to minimize the stress for these animals. So no variation. You know, I worked with the Deming people for a while in my Dow career, and that's what we learned about, no variation. And because the Ringlings did it in 1920. Okay, next. Okay, I love this shot. This is an older loading shot, but it shows everything. An example. Here's the wagon holes this way. Okay, that's why when Matt was there, he did that job right. He got their word right, and they loaded this wagon right. Now, that team there, that's the pullover team. That driver and those two horses do the same job every day that they unload. This team is the takeaway team. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it? You take away the wagon that's dropped here, see that one? And you put it over here. And that's all you do. And the same two horses get the same driver all through the season. And again, why? You already answered. You know the answer to that. You have got to create comfort and familiarity with these animals. Otherwise, you end up with situations that you don't want to handle. Now, then you've got other teams that now, where's that stupid circus lot? Probably 2 miles away. Now you got to pull those wagons, and it has raining today, so it's going to be muddy. And so every team will probably make 2 trips. This is one section of the train. And I haven't told you how many sections totally are coming yet. This is just one section. Each team gets 2 trips. They are really freaking tired when they get at the end of that second trip. But they get there 2 miles or whatever, maybe it's only a mile, they come back, hook up to the next, what, different wagon? Same wagon. And off they go again. So I love that shot. So, and they talked about some of the article. They had thousands watching this because it's free. And Ringling wanted to figure out how to charge people. They could not figure out how to do that, but not hundreds showed up. Thousands showed up because it was just unreal seeing this first train come in pulled by steam, all the wagons, and I'll tell you a little bit what's on them in a minute, followed by another, followed by, I can't tell you because I want you to not get that on the test. Okay, next. You get an idea of what this is massive to move this? Okay, typical teams needed. 1 10-horse team, 15 8-horse, 24 6-horse, 16 4-horse, 14 2-horse, 6 saddle, and 1 extra. I mean, you can't afford a lot of extras. I thought they undoubtedly lost horses during the year, and undoubtedly probably had to find some, without a doubt on me. Now, okay, 70 teams, 370 horses, 16 stock cars. Now, you should get that answer right on the test, all right? 23 horses per car. And when you're carrying that much, that's how many stock cars that you got to have ready to go. And they're 60 feet long. They're not 70 feet that they became. They were 60 feet in the 20s. Okay, next slide. Jim McCracken was the head team master for like 40 years with Ringling Brothers. That's his data. Okay, this is interesting shot coming off of, I asked you about an N car. Didn't see anybody get that right away. An N car is an N car because of that. What's that? Put a rope around it. And it allows the wagon to go down the ramp slowly, because you actually will wear these things out because of the friction of the rope. These wagons are massive in weight. The only lightweight wagons on a Ringling train or any circus train were the cage wagons, because all you had it was in an animal and a lot of air. But the typical wagon was packed to every square inch. And one of the things that was interesting about most circuses, you could have any size suitcase you needed for your belongings as long as it was the Ringling Brothers suitcase size. You had no variation. I'm sorry, Matt. I know you like your precious doll babies to go in there, but if you get the same size trunk, because yeah, that's right. They got to pack them in the same, what do? The same way every time. So you can't have odd lengths on it. Now, right, as long as it's black, right. Now, so massive, and you got only one guy back there holding it. Now, in the detail, it took me a while to confirm. Look at that on the Ringling. That is metal going 4-foot lengths. So as I get into modeling that, I've got to put a steel strap on the top with bolts every 4 feet. I think that was done for protection. I can't find exact reasons, but the Ringling Brothers flat cars had that on them, had a round. So here's the ramp. that's coming down to the grade, to the street crossing to unload that wagon. And there's a, go ahead on the next, there's a guy holding the pole. And this shows this more. Would you want to do that? A lot of people got hurt and hurt badly. Because if somebody had a rock or something there, the weight of that wagon, that tongue swung, big time damage. And so that was a very dangerous job unloading. Okay, next. Okay, now, again, we're unloading wagons. How many did I have in that one slide? 130 wagons. Backlock wagons, no parade wagons. And the Ringling typically carried 5 to 6 tractors, somewhere around that, because tractors were starting to come in vogue in the 1920s, but they weren't often enough that they still used the pull away teams until in the 30s. Now, these horses are not dumb. Now, what is it they do the same way all the time? These horses, eventually, you don't have to tell them where to go. And now, remember, the train comes, do you think it comes only in the daylight and leaves in the daylight? No. This is most done at dark. No street lights. So how do they do that? The little black squares are flares. If the horse team is going straight, again, no street lights hardly. So somebody's gonna mark the lane to where the big show lot is. If the horses are going straight, flare on each side. Or the horses, yep, I'm going straight that way. And now if you're turning, okay, put the flare different. You go between the 2 flares. And the books on the circus horses say that by the end of the season, halfway during the season or what, the horses knew. You didn't need to tell them. You just giddy up and they would turn. Horses aren't dumb. They knew how to get there. That just amazed me and then when I thought, yeah, this is all done in the dark for the most part. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. Now, some of the sections come in and the light is there. The light is coming up, but not section 1. And I'll go ahead. Okay, coaches. Now this is something, most of the cars all had 8 truss rods. And on the flat cars, I'm trying to figure out where those truss rods are. I've got pictures of some of the flat cars, Ringling, the truss rod, I was saying, Matt, is on the side. So if I'm modeling that, I got that's a bear. I don't have that. I'd rather have it come through the end beam. So I like the pictures that show the 8 bolts and the end beam where I can model that easier. So I don't know what I'm going to do there, but that's a typical coach. Coaches varied through the season as the type, because they didn't have them all standardized. Typically 60 feet long, typically carried. Now, okay, Matt, you just joined the circus. You have no rank. I'm not sure if I like you yet because I don't know how good you work. We're going to put you in a car with 96 people. 6-foot berths, 3 high. You're going to share the berth with Doug. Okay, that's how you get 96 in. Yeah, hopefully he doesn't eat tacos or beans or something. But 96 people. Now they did now. If you're a star, you would get a berth on both sides. That's how they had the div. Now you got to remember, you got 1,000 people to move. So there weren't too many cars where it was 96 people, but if you've been on the show for a while, Doug would get his own nice 6-foot booth. That's all you had. 1/3 and double deep. That's everything you owned had to go in that. That's all. And that's how you, now if you were a star, you got, and you were traveling with your family, you got the side here and the side here, and they divvied up. That's how you had to figure out how to move 1,000+ people. Okay, next. Okay, section 1, 4 stock cars, 6 coaches, 17 flats, 18 cooking wagons, blacksmith stable, horse tents, menagerie, tractors, stake drivers, water, ticket wagon, and the cage cut. So the first circus train that comes in the 1920s had this on it. Now, why would you have the cooking wagons on? Well, you got to have breakfast ready to go at 6 o'clock. So the first group of people eat then, and what do you got coming? You got 1,000 people coming that are looking for breakfast. Then they're going to be looking for lunch. Then they're going to be looking for dinner. So when does the train have to get there to be ready to go at 6 o'clock? Is it going to be daylight? No, it's going to be dark. Unless it was a short distance, maybe, and it was like, I mean, there's exceptions to everything I'm saying on that, but so, and you've got horses, so you want the blacksmiths there, you want the stable there, you want the horse tents, you want to get all that set up for what's coming. So that's always on the first section. And the menagerie comes. Why does that come on the first section, do you think? Well, pardon me? You got to have some place to put them, and what's done when everybody's inside the big top for the 8 o'clock show? They've been through the side show. They've been through the menagerie. Do you need the menagerie anymore? No. So you get it out of the way. So that's why. And so a ton of stake drivers. I mean, can you imagine the number of tents from dressing tops, everything? That stake driver is pounding steaks all the time, and then you got to pull them out. And water. Every section has to have water wagon because you have to have a ton of water. Hopefully, the advanced man found water, and you could get water there. But if you couldn't, then you got to use water tanks to get there. They always carry 3 or 4. Why a ticket wagon on the first section? You're right. You want to be ready. You want that money. And you'll have people who will be buying because you got 2,000 to 3,000 people there probably watching that train come in, and you want to sell tickets. So that's the first section. And look at the number of cars. Okay, next. I'm not going to go through every section. That's what a Mack truck. This happens to be one in Peru, Indiana. That's what they looked like back then. They carried around 5 to 6. Next. Okay, so section 1 and 2 to give you a comparison. Did I lie to you? No, I didn't, did I? 24 cars? 25. This is in 1927 off of that loading list. Section 2 had 12 flats, 6 stock cars, and 6 coaches. And these stock cars are bringing mainly draft horses because remember, you're pulling wagons. These horses have already done their job. They're resting in the tents. Now these guys' turn. Next. Okay, section 3 actually in 27, because this is a 27 loading list. Ringling did have, and Barnum Bay Bailey had a white elephant. They had it only for 1 year. It came from overseas, and you can imagine the advertising they got out of that. They had a special white elephant car built for that. So it was part of it. Again, 24, 25, 24. What's that add up to? 98. 98 cars around 60 feet long, 4 trains to get that show moved. And on the section 4, that's where the elephants come from, the lead stock camels, because you're still, the big top is the last thing to come down. 11 coaches, the private, are then moving in. And what happened with a lot of people, you came maybe to the 8 o'clock show and you came through the side show, and then you got to go through the menagerie to get into the big top. And then you're done and you come out. There's no menagerie. There's no side show. And they said a lot of people, what's going on here? I know I remember stuff because it's already gone. It's already gone. Who eats at 5 o'clock? The people in section 1 eat. because they got to tear down and get ready. No variation, Doug. Okay, next. I hope he gives me a ride back. I don't know. He drove over. I don't know. That's the elephant car. It was actually a different car. It was steel. In 27, they got that early, but look at, that's a monster for one elephant. But that elephant was worth a ton of money. Next. Huh? Just one. What this is a white elephant car. Yeah, yeah. Next slide. Okay, typically, to give you an idea, this is not the best shot, but I wanted to keep this talk under 3 hours. Elephant cars. Why do the elephant cars look like that compared to the stock cars? Stock cars are pretty vented. That looks pretty closed. Why? Yes, nosy critters. So you absolutely have to keep the elephants contained, and you also have to watch the ventilation on them. But typically now, in 1919, when Ringling rolled out 5 elephant cars, they typically traveled with 4. Now, when I get hopefully to do this with the circus people, I'm gonna, what do they do with the extra elephants? Because Ringling and Barnum Bailey in the 19-teens traveled with 4 elephant cars each, all filled with elephants. Now, what do? Go up to, Ken, I got an extra elephant this year. They eat peanuts. Can I leave one at your house for you? I don't know what they did. They probably sold them, but they had to get rid of some elephants. But they traveled with 5 elephant cars the very first year and then quickly got down to 4 because 30 elephants is a lot of elephants. Okay, next. Oh, and the other thing, I got a model. There's a small opening on the bottom of all elephant cars called the poop chute. I mean, you got to get that stuff out, and they had that so it was a little bit easier to clean, because when the elephants were in the tent and the horses in the tent, that's the time you go clean everything. Okay, next. This is not a Ringling shot because there are not shots inside, but it kind of shows the inside. 8 elephants typically per car, 4 on each end, chained on one leg to the back on one side. The other would get the other chain on the other, so they couldn't move around. 2 in the back of the car, 2 in the middle, and then the other side. The rear end would always smell the rear end of the elephants nearby, so they didn't pack them in, but they kept them pretty close in side to side. So they tried to put them the same size so they wouldn't get hurt. But typically 1 chain and 1 leg inside. So 8 elephants per car. Okay. Okay, so now you got some knowledge. 26 coaches for 1,000 plus people, 12 stock cars, 6 stock cars for 150 ring stock horses, 4 elephant cars, 1 camel. Lead stock is defined by, that's like a zebra. It's something you can lead. So they carried a lot of zebras, and I'm surprised because zebras, well, you saw what happened in Pickerington. Zebras are kind of nasty in general. White elephant car, private, and they carried a couple storage cars. Okay, that was the train. Okay, next. Okay, now we're talking about, again, moving. In 1908, what Ringling Brothers needed daily: 20 gallons of evaporated milk, 1,000 pounds of bread, 3,000 pounds of beef. You can just read it. 300 pies, 4 varieties, please. I mean, daily, without exception. And even Sunday, without exception. And so you got to have the advanced person have all of this situated and coming. Now, how does it get there? Now think of the wagons. Think of the open door trucks that brought all this there. I mean, the logistics to me are mind-boggling what it takes daily. So if that show is in Chicago, which they would stay in for 3 or 4 days, this got to happen daily. So you got critters coming and butts, carts and wagons. Go ahead. Now, animal food, you got to feed those things too, I guess. 5 tons of hay, 20 tons of straw, 50 bushels of oat, 100 pounds of bran. I have not seen the thing on meat for cats. Now, I do know that in Peru, where circuses wintered, if a horse died, you got cats over here, you got a dead horse here. And you want to feed them. You know what happens there. I do not know what they had to get meat in to feed the cats. Now, fortunately, you didn't have hundreds of cats, but you had leopards, you had whatever you were hauling that year, and it changed from year to year on what they had in the animal cages. Next, you get an idea of better as what it takes to move this show of people. There's a picture, 1995, one day of horse stuff, one day. You had to get it there. Okay, next. Okay, when I went last year, a guy bid me out on one that was even nicer, but I ended up with this one. I pulled data from 1925. So I went through that and just detailed the heck out of where they started and where they stopped. So it's for real data. That's what it looked like. That is a real route book. Absolutely, very rare. And next time, nobody will outbid me. I want a different one for 1923, but if I find that, I will really bid competitively, I will say. Next. Now, okay, 1925 cities. You leave from Bridgeport. 7-month season, you're going to visit 130 cities. 2 shows, 6 days a week. If you remember that on the test. What day are you off? Monday, right? No, Sunday. And repeat exactly, and you return to Bridgeport 14,000 miles later. That to me is mind-boggling. The winter headquarters quickly moved, and there was a great question earlier, quickly moved to Florida. Because more room, better conditions, but they ended up doing something else. Baggage stock went to Peru. And you don't do that just for a cavalier reason. Why do you think they sent everything to Peru that was baggage stock?
Cheaper.
Not cheaper, better quality hay. As they studied the quality of hay in Florida sucked. But Indiana hay, high quality, had the right nutrition that they needed. And so it costs more, but you did it. Because if you can imagine the investment in 350 draft horses, typical circus life, 7, 8, 9 years. You want to keep them healthy. So that blew me away when, okay, that's another logistics nightmare that got to move all those stock cars now to Peru, Indiana. And one thing about Peru, Indiana, when I visited, it was home to many circuses, I think 5, but I know for sure 3. I absolutely know that Peru, Indiana, real bad economic town now, but it had 5 trains coming, 5 different railroads coming through. So from a circus logistics, oh, that's, man, you love that. Because now if somebody doesn't treat me right, I can go to New York Central or maybe Pennsylvania. I mean, that was neat. So good for a long time. Next. Okay, now railroads used, and I hope there's been enough railroads here to keep you folks with me. 31 railroads used. There was a cost to change railroads, as you can imagine. Railroads that we used 10 or more times, there were only 3. Pennsylvania, which you might guess because they traveled a lot in that area, Southern and Southern. And you got 4 engines plus crew, and they need to be trained on how to move a circus train. That's not their normal training. And you got to do that many times without screwing it up. And that I can't imagine the list. I don't know who they would have do that, but they had to have somebody do that. Yes, Matt.
Crews just use blindfold, you can switch it.
They did the switching at the location too. When that section moves in, that crew has got to get the section lined up so they can unload, and then maybe sometimes a section might have to be cut in two, you know, depending on the siding they've got. And you've got, now you come to a town that's probably not Chicago, and you've got 100-car train. You don't have sidings around that. I think trains ended up in sidings in near, I mean, you do what you ever have to locate those cars somewhere. And you got regular traffic coming too. So I can imagine the switching of these crews was, they had to think about it, and the advance man had to check that out. He had to advise that we don't have enough room for 100 cars in this town to clear the main for the normal passenger trains of the time. And in the 20s, geez, we really had passenger trains. Can you believe that? Okay, next.
What kind of training?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I can only speculate, and I mean, I just can't imagine what it would take in communicating to these people. And I think you wanted to use the same railroads as often as possible, because then they were used to you. But engineers and firemen would change probably from year to year, and now you got to get a new person to say, I don't want you damaging my elephants. And so that's, I don't know. It boggles me what it takes to do that from a training. Yeah, I would think. Yeah, I mean, that, yeah, there's a 1914. I did have that in the collection. That's a Ringling Brothers, Section 2 train arriving. Now, that's 2, so there'd be no elephant cars. That's the Section 2 cars coming in. So those are all draft horses there, but different engines. Okay. Next. Okay, give you an idea of the distances. I thought, I mean, this may not be fascinating to you all, but that process engineer in me, I go at this and I go, oh my God, how did they do this? Depart from Bridgeport, 19 major 2-day cities. Okay, so they stayed twice in a couple of cities, 100 one-day cities. So you're doing this a lot. Sundays off are a travel day. If you weren't showing, because of the distances in the Montana and the Dakotas, as you're going the west, you got some distances there. Sometimes you were traveling on Sunday because you got to make up some time. 50 miles or less, 19 cities. So that's a pretty short hop. That's where I said, if it's only 50 miles away, the first section might leave in the daylight. In the summer, it still might be light. By the time you get to the city 50 miles away, it still might be light. But when you get to 50 to 100 miles, we're 49 cities. 100 to 150 miles, 32 cities were that in that mileage range. And then you had runs of, I didn't list them all, but just to give you an idea, 260, 400, 560 miles. So that was some pretty good running, and you're not running at 80 miles an hour. You're pulling a circus train. So you're probably running lower, you're running white flags, you got to schedule all that and not screw up everybody else on the main line. And I would love to read a book on the logistics of how they handle that. I've not seen any of that information at this point. Go ahead. Okay, now we're done. And oh shit, we need more wagons, because what happens when you leave a town, all that is left behind. And now this is an interesting shot, because that is circus wagons. So I know where this isn't. They would not have used circus wagons on a one-day stop to do this. You don't have that luxury of time. This had to be Chicago, New York, LA, where the wagon is there. And now you need to clear all that crap because you got more straw coming in. So you do then would use probably some seat wagons, fill them up, take them down to boxcars. But I would imagine that when the circus left, there was a lot of free fertilizer. I have no idea how they got rid of it. But again, all I could think of is it's going to take more wagons and probably trucks. I mean, I think farmers were offered, Ringling would probably try to charge if they could, but it was probably offered for free just to get it going and off of that. So that's it. There was a, where did I run?
That's Mike Wolf's favorite slide.
What? Oh, shit. Okay. Is it? So okay. Okay, that's, okay. I kind of know that. Okay. I've got extra, if somebody, the Circus Historical Society sent me these. If somebody wants, they're back there, just grab them. If you just want it for your own souvenir or something from this.